Okay, parents, your kids are going to turn out just fine.
This episode of the Your Kids Will Be Fine podcast is brought to you by True Height. True Height is what your child needs to help them reach their full growth and height potential. It is not a magic pill that will make your child grow beyond their genetic potential, but what it does do is that True Height addresses the areas that can limit growth potential, especially the areas of nutrition, sleep, and stress. I use and recommend True Height products in my own practice because the ingredients are clean. They are well researched. They're backed by clinical trials. Kids in my practice love it. It tastes great. Even the picky eaters like it. For more information, you can go to the podcast website, yourkidswillbefine.com, or go to True Height Vitamins, that's TruHeight, trueheightvitamins.com. Welcome to the Your Kids Will Be Fine podcast. I am Dr. Michael Malapsky, board certified pediatrician, also parent of 7 wonderful children and now 3 grandchildren. Here on Your Kids Will Be Fine, we talk about that there is an enormous amount of information out there that parents have to sift through, and we're here to help you cut through all the noise and help you understand, hey, what's really important when it comes to these topics as a parent. So today we're going to talk about parenting for your children's mental health. If you have been reading any of the major publications or on social media, there's no doubt that we've been running into an enormous amount of output around what can parents do to foster mental health. And by far, the majority of the discussion has really centered around smartphones and social media. And there's no question that since 2011, when smartphone usage really became more common, over 50% of people, and now it's got to be more than 80%, especially kids in middle school and high school, that really has correlated with a significant increase in poor mental health metrics when it comes to our kids, especially in girls, and we can talk about that. But many people, when they come to my office and we talk, and they say, well, what steps can parents take way before that? What processes and choices can we look at when it comes to fostering positive mental health in our kids? And the truth is that mental health metrics have been steadily worsening in this country since the 70s. And yes, that the inclusion in our cultural milieu of smartphones and social media has no doubt had an impact. They are a part of much larger cultural forces and changes that our children's brains are now marinating in and exposed to that are way different than they were 20 to 30 years ago. As a Gen X parent, and many of my Gen X colleagues, we tend to over-romanticize, I think, a lot of our experience and how it was way healthier. And there are definitely elements that we can talk about in terms of what were the positive things that kids growing up in the pre-tech era, or when the tech in your house was really an Atari 2400, what was that, and what are those things that we can learn and apply now? But not everything was necessarily better. And so I think that understanding that as parents we can take steps and make intentional choices with our kids from very early on, way before smartphones and social media come into the picture, that really have a positive impact on mental health outcomes. And this is where people joining the discussion who are not just psychologists, but also data scientists and people who can look at information without emotion and without an agenda to help us really understand what those are. So this is one of those situations that two things are often true at once. The first thing to know is that there's no question that online spaces where our children spend time require massive reform. They require way more guardrails and way more understanding of their impact and how those things are dealt with, especially in schools. 2, that social media alone and smartphones alone are not necessarily singularly responsible for rewiring our kids' brains, and they're not the only cause of poor mental health outcomes that we're seeing. It's part of a larger picture of which they are a part of, no question. The truth is that our kids will all eventually need to know how to safely navigate all of these things in their lives, social media and smartphones. They are not going anywhere. So simply cutting them off or denying access is not really long-term going to help us. So we have to talk about what are the parenting choices we can take along the way that foster positive mental health. So let's start at the very beginning in terms of the choices that we all make as parents, how much impact they have. In general, not all choices and things that we do for our kids all have the same long-term impact. A lot of our individual parenting choices that we make along the way tend not to have a huge amount of long-term impact. But several data scientists have looked at one of the important choices, statistically speaking, that has a lot to do with is where we choose to live. It turns out the community and the neighborhood we choose to live in and surround our family with has a huge impact on how we as parents function around our kids, which definitely has certain advantages in long-term positive adult outcomes. So what are those elements of a neighborhood? Well, generally a neighborhood where most people are two-parent households, where most households are college educated, where those households have parents who are invested in the process of raising their kids, that it's important to them. So there's no question that impacts us. So really the choice of your neighborhood and community, statistically speaking, can have a long-term impact on emerging, healthy, conscientious, happy adults. So now let's talk about in our homes, the choices and the things that we do when it comes to fostering mental health. So definitely the parenting style that has become more and more pervasive and the norm, especially since we started raising kids. My oldest child is 27. He was born in 1996. My youngest child was born in 2010. We definitely, as parents, have straddled the invasion of our children's lives of technology, as well as the rest of the culture. And I'm going to endorse this in my own experience, that there's definitely been a trend towards more intensive parenting. What does that mean? The other terms, interchangeable terms that have been used here are things like helicopter parenting, snowplow parenting. I think we all know what we're talking about in terms of micromanaging and intervening in our kids' lives, starting with every organized structure of not just their school time, but their free time and their playtime. So we do know that has a negative long-term impact on mental health. The other thing to know about those choices is that there's no single way, there's no primary one-size-fits-all formula for positive parenting and raising healthy, conscientious, and successful adults. There's many ways for your kids to have a happy childhood. But there's definitely the two concepts of getting away from intensive parenting, but what do you replace that with? And so I think that there's a great writer, great psychologist, who put out a recent parenting book that I really enjoyed, comparing the processes of parenting to carpentry or gardening. The carpentry approach, much more the intensive parenting approach, is where you're hammering and molding and building a childhood intervening in every aspect of your kid's childhood, versus the gardening approach, which is that you pour labor into creating conditions in which your kids grow into the version that they are generally supposed to be, whatever that looks like. The conditions of safety and stability and love, and really, really focusing on how you do that as a parent, and then the outcome will sort of organically emerge. So I can say, from someone who works with children every day in the clinic and work with families, and on my own parenting journey for the last 27 years, I can say that this definitely has merit. And focusing as a parent on the sort of general processes of displaying love, validating feelings, regular, consistent presence and quality time, create a soil, a rich condition that your kid will land in and flourish. In terms of the values and the things that they value or find important, that comes from modeling and what we show them at home. The other part of gardening, and when it comes to getting away from intensive parenting, for sure has to be consistent and safe ways for your children to develop independence and autonomy, meaning feeling comfortable and confident in doing things on their own, away from you and without your direct supervision and management. Now, that seems really scary, especially in today's world. But there's no question that the world today is way safer than the world that a lot of the Gen Xers grew up in the 70s and 80s. It simply feels more dangerous because we're exposed to so much more information. But the statistics are clear that it is a safer world for our kids than it used to be. So finding this may go back to the choice of community, a place where you can feel confident and safe and comfortable in giving your kids more opportunities, especially when it comes to their engagement and interaction and play with other kids, that's not necessarily directly supervised or micromanaged, has an enormous impact on mental health. This has been observed recently in just comparing how other countries do this compared to our own. So once again, getting away from that intensive micromanagement part of parenting as a conscious choice and making choices about how we create an environment in our home, more of the gardening concept that promotes those positive qualities and helps our kids develop into the happy, conscientious, positive young adult that we want them to be in whatever way that looks for them. Another important aspect of this is that it's okay for parents to normalize their own well-being. The well-being of the parent and the family over the optimization of your child can have, I think, pay big dividends, because we know that healthy, happy caregivers promote a happier, more positive environment. It's okay to normalize and prioritize adult friendships and adequate sleep and adequate self-care for ourselves for the benefit of our children. And there's no question that when we take this approach, we minimize this anxiety-driven intensive parenting that seems to be overly goal-oriented. And that, no question, takes a toll on our kids' mental health. So when it comes to the question of social media and smartphones, just want to be absolutely clear, there's no question that parents need to be thoughtful about how and when those are introduced. I personally think that waiting for smartphone introduction until your kids are mature enough to be able to take cues on it, on how to manage and navigate those spaces safely, is good. I think 8th grade is appropriate. I think giving kids smartphones in elementary school, probably not a good idea. But can your kid have a flip phone so they can call you, so that they can reach you in an emergency? Yes, but those are very different things than a smartphone. And then I think the biggest and most important communal impact is I believe that in middle school and high school, smartphones simply shouldn't be part of your child's day at school. I think that most schools who have successfully taken that out, teachers, staff, administrators, kids all report the benefits. They're more engaged, they're less distracted, they're more social, they spend more time, just like we did in the 70s and 80s, sitting around the lunchroom and talking and relating without the phones being in the way. So there's no question that those things will have a positive impact on our kids' mental health and growth and development. But they are a part of the bigger picture of the choices and the environment that we create for our family and in our homes with the choices that we make. And creating a healthier overall environment for our children's brains, emotions, and personalities to flourish. So you can always find our podcast at yourkidswillbefine.com. Don't forget also our YouTube channel for Your Kids Will Be Fine podcast. Leave comments. We'd love to hear suggestions for show topics. We'd love to talk about anything that our community of listeners want to talk about. And we're looking forward to seeing you next week.